Every evil parents who killed their children full list life sentences. Welcome back to Crime Ledger USA, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari. In a secluded corner of rural Michigan, where neighbors were few and outside contact was rare, a story unfolded that would disturb even the most seasoned investigators. Seth Welch and Tatiana Fusari were just 27 when their youngest daughter, Mary Welch, died in August 2018. She was 10 months old, yet weighed barely 8 pounds, only slightly more than her birth weight. Her eyes were sunken deep into her face. Her tiny body was described by prosecutors as all skin and bones, her posture skeletal-like. An autopsy revealed a body ravaged by prolonged starvation and dehydration, a shrunken thymus, bone marrow incapable of producing blood cells, and damage to the heart, lungs, and abdominal organs. Assistant Prosecutor Kim Richardson told the jury she looked like a 100-year-old baby. The investigation uncovered a disturbing dynamic. Welch had long distrusted doctors and vaccinations, believing only faith in natural evolution could protect his children. Fusari, in court testimony, described a home life dominated by abuse, physical, sexual, and emotional. She claimed Welch would not allow her to take Mary to a doctor, controlling every decision about their children's care. Text messages retrieved from Welch's phone showed his frustration. He complained about the girls crying and admitted Mary had been gagged to keep her quiet. On the day she died, Welch didn't immediately call 911. When he finally made the call, his tone was described by the judge as callous, referring to Mary as dead as a doorknob. The couple's home told its own story: mold spreading across walls, insects infesting the space, and a farm in decline. Child Protective Services had previous contact with the family, including a case in 2014 when Thake was found in the system of their eldest newborn. Despite these red flags, Mary remained in their care. Prosecutors argued the neglect was not sudden but intentional over weeks, a pattern that directly caused her death. The trials brought swift verdicts. In June 2020, Welch was convicted of first-degree murder after just 90 minutes of jury deliberation. In October 2021, Fusari's jury returned the same verdict in just over 3 hours. Michigan law mandates life imprisonment without parole for first-degree murder, and both were given that sentence. Welch's visible shock at hearing his fate contrasted with Fusari's expressionless stare, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Their reactions, caught on video, spread quickly online, fueling public outrage and debate. Beyond the courtroom, the case sparked nationwide discussion about religious exemptions in child welfare laws. 34 states and Washington, D.C., allow some form of religious defense in neglect cases, a provision critics say endangers children by enabling parents to refuse necessary medical care. Medical experts and child advocacy groups pointed to Mary's death as a tragic example of how these laws can fail the most vulnerable. From this heartbreak come urgent lessons. Belief systems must never override a child's need for immediate medical attention. Social or geographic isolation can conceal abuse, making vigilance from extended family, neighbors, and community members critical. And any sign of neglect, especially in infants, requires swift intervention, no matter how uncomfortable that confrontation may be. Mary's short life and painful death leave a question hanging over both law and conscience. When the beliefs of parents stand in the way of their child's survival, how far should society go to protect those who cannot protect themselves? Number 2. Maria Cuatro Jr. and Ursula Elaine Juarez. In the summer heat of Palmdale, a supposed drowning would unravel into one of California's most disturbing child abuse cases. Jose Maria Cuatro Jr., 27, and his partner, 25-year-old Ursula Elaine Juarez, told authorities that their 4-year-old son, Noah Cuatro, had drowned in a pool on July 5th. But when the autopsy was performed, there was no trace of water in his lungs, only the unmistakable evidence of sustained abuse. The coroner's findings were chilling: fractured ribs in various stages of healing, a broken vertebra, lacerations on his liver, and bruises across his small body. Signs of sexual assault were evident, including fresh injuries. The cause of death was asphyxiation combined with blunt force trauma. Grand jury transcripts later revealed the extent of Noah's suffering. Prosecutors said Cuatro doubted that Noah was his biological son, a suspicion disproved by DNA testing after the boy's death, and targeted him with violence. Juarez, his mother, sent a message that left even seasoned investigators stunned. "Almost killed him so many times I had to do CPR for him to wake up and stay alive right." Noah's siblings told investigators they were often hungry, that their father would punch them and beat them with a belt, and that they had seen their parents hurting Noah. Noah's great-grandmother testified that Juarez had once told her she didn't like the boy. His great-aunt described Cuatro in court as the worst kind of human being I've ever met, an evil monster. These were not impulsive acts, prosecutors said, but part of a calculated pattern of physical and sexual abuse that stretched over months. The tragedy was compounded by the role of the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. Noah had been removed from his parents' custody multiple times during his short life. In May 2019, a social worker secured a judge's order to remove him again on suspicion of sexual abuse. That order was overruled by Jeff's supervisors. Less than 2 months later, Noah was dead. He was betrayed not only by his parents, Assemblyman Tom Lackey later said, but also by the network established to protect children from mistreatment. The drowning story unraveled quickly under forensic scrutiny. In September 2019, both parents were charged with murder and torture. Cuatro also faced a charge of sexual penetration of a child under 10. Years of legal proceedings followed, with graphic details unsealed in grand jury transcripts. In March 2024, they accepted plea deals, Cuatro to first-degree murder and torture, Juarez to second-degree murder and torture, both pleading no contest, a legal acknowledgement of conviction without admitting guilt. In April 2024, Judge Robert G. Chu sentenced Cuatro to 32 years to life in prison, Juarez to 22 years to life. In the packed Antelope Valley courtroom, family members of Noah and relatives of other child abuse victims sat together. Why, my God, why is there such evil in you, Ursula? What kind of monster are you, Josie? His great-grandmother demanded. Cuatro stared forward without emotion. Juarez kept her gaze fixed downward, her lips pressed tight. From this case emerge urgent lessons. Early signs of abuse must never be ignored, regardless of who the suspected abuser is. When child welfare agencies hesitate or fail, persistence and escalation can save lives. And no matter how uncomfortable it may be, speaking up when something feels wrong in a child's home can be the only thing standing between that child and tragedy. Noah's life ended before it truly began, leaving a question that lingers beyond the verdicts and sentences. If a child can be failed so completely by both family and system, what will it take to make never again more than just words? Number 3, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. When two devoted believers claimed divine visions, no one imagined it would end in missing children, multiple deaths, and a web of lies stretching across states, until the graves revealed the unthinkable truth. Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell were once ordinary faces in their communities. But in 2019, their names became tied to a chain of deaths that prosecutors said were fueled by twisted apocalyptic beliefs and the pursuit of money and power. Lori's teenage daughter, Tylee Ryan, and her adopted 7-year-old son, JJ. Vallow vanished in September that year. Chad's first wife, Tammy Daybell, died just weeks later. And months before, Lori's estranged husband, Charles Vallow, had been shot dead by her brother, Alex Cox. The pattern was chilling. Friends and family testified that Lori and Chad believed some people were possessed by dark spirits and could only be freed through death. Those labeled dark, Charles, Tylee, JJ, and Tammy, became victims. Prosecutors argued that behind the religious language lay simple motives: life insurance payouts, social security benefits, and removing anyone who stood in the way of their relationship. Forensic evidence told the rest. Tylee's remains were found burned and dismembered in a makeshift pet cemetery on Chad's property. Jade was discovered nearby, wrapped in plastic and duct tape, asphyxiated. Tammy's autopsy revealed signs of asphyxiation and bruising from a struggle. Charles Vallow had been shot twice, the second time while already on the ground, what prosecutors called an execution. Investigators pieced together months of planning. Lori had ordered wedding rings before Tammy's death and searched for dresses on the day of Tammy's burial. Text messages showed Chad and Lori discussing life insurance policies and perfectly orchestrated plans to take the children. Trials followed in Idaho and Arizona. In 2023, Lori was convicted in Idaho of murdering Tylee and Jay and conspiring to murder Tammy. In 2025, Arizona juries found her guilty of conspiring to murder Charles Vallow and attempting to murder Brandon Boudreaux, her niece's ex-husband. Judge Boyce, at her Idaho sentencing, told her she had removed her children as obstacles and followed a bizarre religious rabbit hole to justify killing. She received multiple life sentences without parole. In 2024, Chad was convicted of murdering Tammy, Tylee, and JJ. The jury unanimously imposed the death penalty, citing the murders especially heinous and committed for financial gain. In the court, family members confronted them. "We gotcha, J.J.'s grandmother Kay Woodcock told Lori, and you're not the smartest person in the room." Tammy's relatives spoke of missing her every day, but finding peace in knowing justice had been served. During sentencing, Lori often smiled and laughed, showing no visible remorse. Chad sat rigid, his gaze steady, offering a few words. The contrast between their public demeanor and the horrors described in testimony became a focal point in media coverage. And what remains after the verdicts is more than grief. It's a set of hard truths no one can afford to ignore. Extremist beliefs can be a mask for greed and violence. Questioning radical shifts in loved ones' behavior is crucial. Life insurance or sudden financial moves tied to unexplained deaths demand scrutiny. And the disappearance of a child should trigger immediate, relentless inquiry from family, friends, and authorities alike. These are not abstract warnings, but survival rules drawn in the shadow of real graves. The Daybell case forces an enduring question: when faith, desire, and greed intersect, and no one speaks soon enough, how many more lives can vanish before someone decides the danger is real? Number 4. Sheila Fletcher Fletcher. In a quiet Louisiana town, a routine call led officers to a living room horror. A woman trapped on a couch for over a decade, in conditions no one thought possible. On January 3, 2022, first responders arrived at the home of Sheila and Clay Fletcher, both 66 years old. They were known locally as model citizens, polite and well-liked. But inside their modest living room, on a soiled couch that had sunk into the floor, lay the emaciated body of their 36-year-old daughter, Lacey Ellen Fletcher. The coroner's words still echo in media coverage, by far the worst I've ever seen. Lacey had been confined to that couch for more than a decade. She weighed just 96 pounds, her body fused to the furniture by years of waste and decay. Pressure ulcers had eaten down to the bone. Maggots crawled through open wounds. Forensic examination revealed she had been alive while insects consumed her flesh. Her stomach contents included feces and couch foam, suggesting desperate attempts to eat anything within reach. Sheila and Clay told authorities Lacey had chosen to stay on the couch because of severe social anxiety and autism. They claimed she refused medical treatment and insisted she had locked-in syndrome, able to think clearly but unable to move. But coroner Dr. Ewell DeWitt Bickham I flatly rejected that claim, stating her only diagnoses were autism and anxiety. He concluded she died from chronic malnutrition, untreated infections, and sepsis, conditions entirely preventable with basic care. Investigators discovered that the neglect had stretched back to at least 2010. That year, the parents consulted a doctor without bringing Lacey. They were advised to consider hospitalization. They never followed up. Instead, Lacey's world shrank to the dimensions of the couch. Neighbors rarely saw her. Prosecutors alleged the Fletchers would even leave her alone for days at a time while they took weekend trips. District Attorney Sam D'Aquila described the case as deliberate neglect stretched over years, adding in a press conference, "Did they want to kill her? I want to say yes, they wanted to kill her." He pushed for the maximum penalty, calling it an open and shut case. The crime scene photographs, never publicly released in full, were described in court as appalling and horrific. Veteran sheriff's deputies said it was the only time in their careers they felt physically sick at a scene. The coroner admitted he couldn't sleep for a week. Initially, a grand jury indicted Sheila and Clay for second-degree murder, but a judge later quashed that indictment over technical language. A second grand jury writ indicted them, yet both ultimately accepted a plea deal in March 2024, pleading no contest to manslaughter. Judge Catherine Jones sentenced each to 40 years in prison, the maximum under the plea terms. In the courtroom, Sheila wept quietly while Clay sat motionless, his face expressionless. Their attorney claimed they were remorseful and simply did not want to relive the pain of losing a child in the media. But for prosecutors, advocates, and the public, the overwhelming image was of a young woman abandoned in plain sight until her body gave out. Beyond the shock, this case carries hard truths no community can ignore. Neglect can kill as surely as violence. Caregivers must act before isolation becomes a death sentence. Severe changes in a dependent's health or behavior demand immediate medical attention. And silence from friends or neighbors can be the factor that lets abuse continue for years. These lessons are not abstract. They are drawn from the shadow of Lacey Fletcher's grave, a grave dug far too soon. Her story forces the question that lingers long after the headlines fade: when the most vulnerable cannot speak for themselves, who will speak and act in time to save them? Number 5. David Eugene Baynard, Bobbie Jo Baynard, and Edward Vincent Baynard. In the heart of Cherokee County, South Carolina, a grim reality lurked behind the walls of a modest home on Camp Ferry Road. The story of Heather Baynard, a 14-year-old girl with cerebral palsy and severe mental disabilities, shocked the community and revealed the devastating consequences of prolonged neglect and abuse. David Eugene Baynard, 55, and Bobbie Jo Baynard, 44, were Heather's parents, while her older brother, Edward Vincent Baynard, 22, served as her personal care aide. Despite the family's responsibility to provide care, Heather was left to suffer in horrendous conditions that no child should endure. When Heather died on April 11, 2022, the scene was one of unimaginable neglect. The house was filled with garbage infested with roaches and permeated by a suffocating ammonia-like stench from animal urine and feces. Officers entering the home had to wear protective suits and respirators. The filth and neglect permeated every corner of Heather's existence. Doctors in the coroner described Heather's condition as the worst case of neglect they had ever encountered. Her body was ravaged, her legs resembled raw meat as the skin broke down due to exposure to animal waste, causing severe infection and physical disintegration. An autopsy confirmed she had been deprived of necessary medical care for months, if not years. More than 40 animals were rescued from the home, some malnourished and infested with parasites. 2 dogs were euthanized due to their severe neglect. The prosecution argued the neglect was not accidental but deliberate and prolonged. Despite multiple doctor appointments scheduled to manage Heather's fragile health, the Baynards canceled or rescheduled visits, ignoring urgent medical advice. Edward Baynard, who was paid over $25,000 as Heather's personal care and respite aide, demonstrated a depraved indifference to human life, according to the solicitor Barry Barnett, who stated Heather was left to rot to death. This cruelty was compounded by the family's failure to provide even basic hygiene or a safe living environment. Charged initially with murder and child abuse, all 3 Baynard family members were found guilty in a trial that began in late October 2024. The jury convicted them on all counts, including murder, unlawful conduct towards a child, and infliction of great bodily injury. On October 31, 2024, David and Bobbie Jo Baynard were each sentenced to life imprisonment, plus additional decades for aggravated offenses. Edward received 30 years for murder and concurrent sentences for the other charges. Despite the severity of the crimes, the Baynards showed little remorse in court. Bobbie Jo wept quietly while David remained stoic and detached. Their attorney suggested they wished to avoid reliving the trauma publicly. Meanwhile, Heather's aunts filed a wrongful death lawsuit against state agencies, alleging systemic failures in child protective services and medical oversight that might have saved her life. As the courtroom quiets and verdicts are delivered, the true lesson remains: vigilance, intervention, and speaking out can mean the difference between life and death. Neglect is as lethal as violence, and caregivers must never ignore signs of decline in vulnerable individuals. Urgent medical and social intervention is vital when warning signs appear. And silence from friends, neighbors, or authorities allows abuse to persist, often with fatal results. Beyond the courtroom, Heather Baynard's story forces society to confront uncomfortable truths about the care of disabled and medically fragile individuals. It raises questions about how many more vulnerable lives are at risk when neglect goes unchecked. When those who cannot speak for themselves suffer in silence, who will be their voice and how soon will action come to save them? Number 6, Fernando Vega and Angelina Calderon. 2 infant twins, found lifeless under brutal neglect and abuse, expose a family's darkest secrets in Houston, a story of pain, silence, and a justice system pushed to act. Fernando Vega and Angelina Belinda Calderon, both just 21 years old at the time, were the parents of these 5-week-old twins. The case, unfolding in Harris County, quickly drew intense scrutiny as details emerged about the twins' horrific condition and the parents' alleged role in their deaths. On October 4, 2023, the infants were found unresponsive, their deaths marking a tragic end to lives marked by suffering and violence. Forensic pathologist Dr. Rico testified to injuries consistent with severe physical abuse, blunt force trauma to the head and body, including brain hemorrhages, multiple fractures to ribs, femur, and clavicle, and signs of shaking. Both infants were severely malnourished and dehydrated, showing a stark lack of basic care. One twin had acute brain bleeding, the other suffered hemorrhaging of the brain and spinal cord. The presence of partially healed fractures revealed a disturbing pattern of repeated abuse, not a single incident. Court records painted a grim picture. Fernando Vega allegedly struck the twins with his hands and blunt objects, while both parents neglected essential medical needs. The prosecution alleged this abuse arose from frustrated parenting, a momentary loss of control that turned fatal. Yet the medical evidence and testimony argued otherwise. These were acts of deliberate, repeated cruelty against vulnerable infants. Court documents reveal that Fernando Vega faced charges for possession of a controlled substance at the time and was out on bond. His violent tendencies extended beyond the twins. He had been arrested for unlawfully restraining Angelina Calderon weeks before the infants' deaths. Multiple family members described him as abusive, while Angelina's own relatives expressed conflicting opinions, some defending her as a good mother, others insisting both parents share responsibility for the neglect and fatal harm. Legal proceedings in Harris County have been ongoing since the arrests in April 2024. Fernando Vega was initially charged with 2 counts of injury to a child, later elevated to capital murder. Angelina Calderon faces similar first-degree felony charges related to injury and neglect. Both remain held at Harris County Jail awaiting trial, which is yet to be scheduled. In court, Angelina emotionally stated that Fernando was the last one with my kids when they died and felt she was being unfairly portrayed. Her sister described her as one of the best mothers I know, pleading ignorance of the abuse. Yet the prosecution and even Angelina's aunt argued that the neglect and harm were undeniable and demanded justice for the twins who suffered unimaginably. The public reaction has been one of horror and heartbreak. The community was stunned by reports of the house's conditions and the extent of injuries found on the infants. Early police reports, which downplayed visible injuries, allowed the couple to initially present as grieving parents, but later evidence shattered this narrative, igniting widespread outrage. A GoFundMe page started by Angelina received sympathy and donations before the full story unfolded, highlighting how appearances can mask terrible realities. From this case, vital warnings emerged for families, communities, and authorities alike. Recognizing signs of abuse early and intervening swiftly can save lives. Caregivers struggling with frustration or substance issues require support before neglect becomes fatal, and no child's suffering should ever be hidden or ignored. As the investigation continues, this tragic story demands reflection on the responsibility society holds toward its most vulnerable. When babies lose their chance at life because those entrusted with their care fail them, the question remains, how can communities better protect children before it is too late? Number 7. Rendell, Hoagland, Cindy Warren. In Chester County, a 12-year-old girl's hidden nightmare ended in tragedy. Months of brutal abuse and torture came to light only after her death in 2024, sparking a nationwide call for justice and reform. Rendell Hoagland, Melinda's biological father, aged 52, and Cindy Warren, his fiancée and Melinda's de facto stepmother, 45, stand accused of crimes that shock the conscience. The allegations detail an unimaginable pattern of abuse inflicted on a vulnerable child under their care. Investigators uncovered a grim timeline with evidence of torture stretching back to November 2021. Medical examiners described Melinda's condition as catastrophic. She weighed barely 50 pounds and suffered from starvation compounded by multiple blunt force injuries. Autopsy reports revealed damage to nearly every major organ, including her brain. Approximately 75 bruises, contusions, pressure sores, and at least 6 broken bones covered her emaciated body. Melinda endured daily torment. Prosecutors presented harrowing accounts of how she was shackled naked to furniture during virtual school lessons, forced to stand for hours, run in place, and perform strenuous exercises while being verbally berated through an in-camera speaker. Videos and messages, later deleted by the defendants, showed the extent of her suffering and attempts to conceal injuries with makeup before family members or mandated reporters could intervene. The cruelty was calculated. Authorities revealed Rendell and Cindy systematically manipulated Melinda's environment, isolating her by withdrawing her from in-person schooling in late 2023 to hide the abuse during online classes. Their actions formed a calculated and systematic method of terrorizing, manipulating, and dehumanizing, as described by the Chester County District Attorney. Legal charges against Rendell Hoagland and Cindy Warren have escalated over time. Initially arrested for attempted criminal homicide and assault, they now face first-degree murder, second-degree murder, involuntary servitude, kidnapping, and hundreds of related offenses. Both defendants remain incarcerated at Chester County Prison without bail, awaiting trial likely to unfold in 2025. The prosecution has declared its intent to seek the death penalty, reflecting the gravity of the atrocities committed. Despite overwhelming evidence, Rendell and Cindy have maintained their innocence, claiming Melinda's injuries resulted from accidents and weight loss. However, forensic experts and prosecutors have decisively refuted these claims. The autopsy and hundreds of deleted videos stand as irrefutable testimony to the brutal truth. The victim's family has expressed profound grief and determination. Melinda's half-sisters and Rendell's sister have voiced their sorrow and resolve for justice. They have filed lawsuits against child protective agencies and school districts for systemic failures that allowed the abuse to persist. Their fight extends beyond grief, aiming to push legislative reforms such as a public database tracking child abusers and stronger mandated reporting laws. This case compels us to confront critical warnings. Never ignore signs of abuse, no matter how hidden. Accountability is essential for caregivers entrusted with vulnerable children, and silence or inaction from institutions and communities can allow cruelty to continue unchecked. As the courtroom awaits justice, Melinda's story echoes far beyond Chester County. It challenges society to reflect. How many children suffer unseen? How can systems improve to protect those who cannot protect themselves? The painful truth lingers. Only vigilance, intervention, and unwavering commitment to safeguarding can prevent another tragedy like Melinda's. Number 8. Michael C. Philpott v. Mairead. In a quiet neighborhood in Allenton, Derby, the lives of 6 children were tragically extinguished in a fire that shocked the United Kingdom. On May 11, 2012, the Philpott family home became the scene of a devastating blaze that claimed the lives of Jade, John, Jack, Jesse, Jaden, and Dwayne. These children, aged between 5 and 13, were the innocent victims of a fire deliberately set by their father, Michael Mick Philpott, with the involvement of his fiancée, Mairead Warren, and their friend Paul Mosley. The story behind the flames is one of calculated cruelty and twisted motives. Mick Philpott, then 55, was a father of 17 children, known publicly for his appearances on British television, where he defended his welfare-supported lifestyle. Mairead Warren, aged 45, was the mother of the 6 children lost that night, including her son Dwayne from a previous relationship. The fire was not an accident, but part of a twisted plan intended to frame Mick's former lover, Lisa Willis, who had recently left the household amid a bitter custody dispute. Mick's anger over losing Lisa and the associated welfare benefits led to a plot where setting fire to the house would position him as a hero saving his children, possibly securing a larger council home. Medical examiners revealed the horror inside the charred home. The children succumbed to smoke inhalation in a fire that reached temperatures around 500 degrees. Petrol had been poured across the floor, igniting the flames that trapped the children inside. Judge Thirlwall, during sentencing, described the actions as callous selfishness, while police called it an evil, stupid, shameful act. Evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. Petrol stains on Mairead's clothing and surveillance recordings captured the trio discussing and coordinating their stories to mask the crime. The legal battle culminated at Nottingham Crown Court in 2013, where Mick, Mairead, and Paul were charged initially with murder, but ultimately convicted of 6 counts of manslaughter. The jury deliberated less than 8 hours before returning unanimous verdicts against Mick and majority verdicts against Mairead and Paul. Mick received a life sentence with a minimum of 15 years, while Mairead and Paul also faced lengthy sentences, though Mairead was controversially released on license after serving half her term, stirring public outrage. Throughout the trial, the portrait of Mick Philpott as a manipulative and violent man emerged. Psychologists described him as a psychopath with antisocial personality disorder. His violent past included a conviction for attempted murder in 1978, and he had a history of abusing women, including Mairead. Mairead was seen as complicit, prioritizing Mick's plans over her children's safety. The community response was intense. Courtrooms erupted with anger as verdicts were read, and local residents rallied to support the children's funerals. Public debate focused on the welfare system, which Mick had exploited, and the perceived leniency in sentencing. From this case, several vital warnings emerge. Always scrutinize sudden lifestyle changes that mask deeper problems. Never underestimate the signs of control and manipulation within families. And ensure child welfare agencies are vigilant and proactive in protecting children at risk. As the flames that claimed 6 young lives are long extinguished, their story endures as a somber reminder. Safeguarding the vulnerable requires unwavering vigilance, and justice, though delayed, must never waver. The Philpott tragedy forces us to ask, how many more children suffer in silence, and what will it take to truly protect them? What you've just witnessed are stories that cut through the silence, children betrayed by the very people sworn to protect them. These tragic cases demand more than just outrage. They call for action, awareness, and relentless vigilance. If these stories shook you, if they moved you to question what justice truly means, then don't miss what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to join us at Crime Ledger USA, where every truth uncovered holds the power to prevent the next tragedy. Because behind every headline is a lesson, and behind every victim, a voice that must never be ignored. Stay alert.